War. War never changes. Years of consumption led to shortages of every major resource. The entire world unraveled. Peace became a distant memory. My great-great-grandfather, serving in the army, wondered when he'd get to go home to his wife and the son he'd never seen. He got his wish. Years of consumption led to shortages of every major resource. Peace became a distant memory, and I am afraid war never changes.
Allons, enfants de la patrie, aux armes, citoyens. Entendez-vous dans les campagnes mugir ces féroces soldats? Ils ne passeront pas. Pour la France!
The French spirit, the élan vital, which means the vital momentum of heroism on the battlefield, accompanied the mass infantry charge into the German advance in August 1914, but it was also the steadfast defense at the Marne that saved Paris. For many, that miracle spoke of the French determination to withstand even the greatest foe, even after that foe had his boots buried deep into French soil. It became a battle for survival for its defenders as the German armies threatened the national symbol of Verdun. While the British always had the option of withdrawing to their island, for the French, soldier and civilian alike, it was a war of their homes and their soil, occupied and destroyed by their arch enemies. So the French fielded more men than their allies. They suffered greater casualties. They pioneered tactics like the creeping barrage. They fielded mighty tanks, and for the first true air force, and by the end of the war, it was a Frenchman who commanded the Allied forces. During his 2-year tenure as German Army Chief of Staff, Erich von Feigenheim was convinced that the war had to be won in the West, and that meant in France. The French, however, were not going to let this happen. For the first half of the year of the war, they provided the bulk of the manpower of the Western Front, and throughout the war held off the Germans and leaders of the Entente powers. French soldiers also fought on most other fronts of the war, like the Balkans, the Gallipoli, Africa, and the Pacific. It was the French who produced the new weapon, the tank. In the greatest numbers, French military writers who described modern assault tactics, and it was the French 75 field gun, for which the Germans had no match, that the military historians called the savior of France. Fighting on their home soil, with large areas of the industry and resources in enemy hands, the French nevertheless turned the war into a war of attrition, and it was a war of the Central Powers could not win. The Battle of Verdun, fought from February 21st to December 18th, 1916, was the largest and longest battle of the First World War on the Western Front between the German and French armies. The battle took place on the hills of North Verdun-sur-Meuse in northeastern France. The German Fifth Army attacked the defenses of the fortified region of Verdun, RFV, on the right bank of the Meuse. Inspired by the experience of the Second Battle of Champagne the year before, the Germans planned to rapidly capture the Meuse Heights, providing them with an excellent defensive position that would also allow them to bombard Verdun with observed artillery fire. The Germans hoped that the French would commit their strategic reserve to recapture the position and suffer catastrophic losses in the Battle of Annihilation, not costly for the Germans because of their tactical advantage. Poor weather delayed the beginning of the German attack until February 21st, but the Germans enjoyed initial success, capturing Fort Dimont in the first 3 days of offensive. The German advance slowed, despite many French casualties. By March 6th, 20.5 French divisions were in the RFV, and a more extensive defense in depth had been constructed. Pétain ordered that On ne passe pas, no withdrawals were to be made and the counterattacks would be conducted, despite exposing French infantry to fire of German artillery. By March 29, French artillery on the west bank had begun a constant bombardment of German positions on the east bank, which caused many German infantry casualties. In March, the German offensive was extended to the left bank of the Meuse to gain observation of the ground from which French artillery had been firing over into the river of the Meuse Heights. The Germans were able to advance at first, but French reinforcements contained the attacks short of their objectives. In early May, the Germans changed tactics to make local attacks and counterattacks, which gave the French an opportunity to begin an attack against Fort de Mont. Part of the fort was occupied until German counterattack recaptured the fort and took numerous prisoners. The Germans changed tactics again, alternating their attacks on both banks of the Meuse, and in June captured Fort Vaux. The Germans continued the offensive beyond Vaux, toward the last geographical objectives of the original plan at Fleury-de-Vent, Daumont, and Fort Souville. The Germans drove salient into the French defenses, capturing Fleury, and came within 2.5 miles of the Verdun citadel. In July 1916, the German offensive was reduced to provide artillery and infantry reinforcements for the Somme front, and during local operations the village of Fleury changed hands 16 times, from June 23rd to 17th of August. A German attempt to capture Fort Souville in early July was repulsed by artillery and small arms fire. To supply reinforcements for the Somme front, the German offensive reduced further, and attempts were made to deceive the French into expecting more attacks, to keep French reinforcements away from the Somme. In August and December, French counteroffensive recaptured much of the ground lost in the East Bank and recovered Fort Daumont and Fort Vaux. The Battle of Verdun lasted for 303 days and became the longest and one of the most costly battles in human history. An estimate in 2000 found a total of 714,231 casualties in total, 377,231 French soldiers, and 337,000 German soldiers, for an average of 70,000 casualties each month. Other recent estimates increased the number of casualties to 976,000 during the battle, with 1.25 million suffered at the Battle of Verdun during the war. The Lebel Model 1886 rifle is an 8mm bolt-action infantry rifle that entered the service in the French Army in 1887. It is a repeating rifle that can hold 8 rounds in the 4-stock tube magazine, 1 round in the transporter, plus 1 round in the chamber. The Lebel rifle is the distinction of being the first military firearm to use smokeless powder ammunition. In spite of early obsolete features, such as its tube magazine and the shape of the 8mm Lebel rimmed ammunition, the Lebel rifle remained the basic weapon of the French line infantry during World War I. Altogether, 3.45 million Lebel rifles were produced by the 3 French state factories between 1887 and 1916. The Berthier rifles and carbines were a family of bolt-action small arms in 8mm Lebel, used in the French army from the 1890s to the beginning of World War II. The Berthier weapons were invented by a French civilian engineer in the Algerian railways named Émile Berthier. The Chauchat, named after its main contributor, Colonel Louis Chauchat, was the standard machine rifle or light machine gun of the French army during World War I. Its official designation was the Machine Rifle Model 1915 CSRG. The Chauchat machine rifle was one of the first light automatic rifle caliber weapons designed to be carried and fired by a single operator and an assistant without a heavy tripod or a team of gunners. The French 75mm field gun was a quick-firing field artillery piece adopted in March 1898. It was commonly known as the French 75, simply the 75. The French 75 was designed as an anti-personnel weapons system for delivering large volumes of time-fused shrapnel shells on enemy troops advancing in the open. After 1915 and the onset of trench warfare, other types of battlefield missions demanding impact detonated high-explosive shells prevailed. The types of weapons employed range from disassembling chemicals such as tear gas and lethal agents like phosgene and chlorine and mustard gas. This chemical warfare was a major component in the First Global War and the First Total War of the 20th century. Although the use of toxic chemicals as weapons dates back thousands of years, the first large-scale use of chemical weapons was during World War I. They were primarily used to demoralize, injure, and kill entrenched defenders against whom The indiscriminate and generally very slow-moving or static nature of gas clouds would be most effective. The F-1 grenade is a hand grenade mass produced by France during and after World War I, used in the mass majority of European countries throughout the First World War and Second World War. And last we have the German flamethrower. A flamethrower is a mechanical incendiary device designed to project a long, controllable stream of fire. They were first used by the Greeks in the 1st century AD. In modern times, they were used during World War I and more widely in World War II. The French nail knife, which were locally fabricated and converted bayonets, knives, and stabbing weapons for use in the First World War. During World War I, the French had a variety of different vehicles such as airplanes and tanks. So I'm going to show you guys some airplanes and tanks that they use for air supremacy, land conquest. First we have the Hanraya HD-1, which is the French World War I single-seat fighter aircraft, projected for service in French squadrons. The Renault FT single tank was referred to in post-World War I literature as the FT-17. It was a French light tank that was among the most revolutionary and influential tank designs in history. The FT was the first production tank to have its armament with a full rotating turret. As such, historians of armored warfare have called the Renault FT the world's first modern tank. The Saint-Chamond tank. The Saint-Chamond, named after the commune of Saint-Chamond, was the second French heavy tank of the First World War.